The late afternoons in Dust Hollow, Nevada, always burned with a relentless sun that scorched the earth until it cracked like old leather. In 1883, the red dust rose in swirling clouds from the town's edges, drifting into every crevice, including the porch of Jasper Holt's small ranch. Jasper, at 37, had lived long enough amid cattle, horses, guns, and silence to understand true solitude in a place where no one should feel alone. His days blurred into routines, mending fences at dawn, herding steers through the arid plains, and evenings spent staring into the flickering light of a kerosene lamp where memories of loss lingered like smoke. He wasn't a man of many words. The townsfolk knew him as the quiet rancher on the outskirts, the one who rode into Dust Hollow only for supplies, flour, nails, and ammunition. His face, weathered by wind and time, bore lines etched deeper than the canyons nearby. Jasper's wife had passed 7 years prior, taken by a fever that no doctor in the territory could cure. Since then, he had built walls around his heart as sturdy as the corral he tended. The ranch was his world, a modest cabin of weathered pine, a barn sagging under the weight of years, and a few dozen head of cattle grazing on sparse grass. No visitors, no letters, no ties to pull him back into the chaos of human connection. That summer, however, something shifted in the dry air. One particularly blistering afternoon, as the sun dipped toward the jagged horizon, casting long shadows across the parched ground, a figure approached on horseback. Jasper spotted her from the porch, squinting against the glare. It was Amelia Vance, the new postal clerk in town. She had arrived from Missouri a few months back, her arrival stirring whispers among the locals. Tall and poised, with hair the color of wheat tied back in a practical braid, she wore a faded calico dress dusted with the inevitable red grit. Amelia dismounted with ease, tying her horse to the hitching post before walking up the creaky steps. "Mr. Holt," she said, her voice steady despite the heat. "I've got mail for you." Jasper wiped his hands on his worn trousers, his brow furrowing. Mail. He hadn't received a letter in years, not since his sister's last note from back east, before she too had faded from his life. He took the envelope from her outstretched hand, noting the faint scent of ink and paper amid the dusty wind. The seal was broken, as if it had been handled roughly in transit. Amelia stood there, not turning away, her eyes, a clear hazel, meeting his without flinching. He tore open the flap, pulling out 2 folded sheets of paper. The handwriting was childish, scrawled in uneven lines with smudges of pencil lead. They weren't addressed to him at all. The first read, "Dear Santa, our dad lives all alone and never smiles anymore. Please send someone so he's not sad." The second echoed the plea. "Santa, Dad is good, but he's lonely. We want him to have a friend like Mom used to be." Jasper's grip tightened on the papers. These weren't his letters. They were children's wishes to Santa Claus, misplaced in the postal shuffle. But the words hit him like a gust of hot wind, stirring something deep and buried. Who were these kids? And why did their innocent requests mirror the emptiness he carried every day? He looked up at Amelia, who hadn't moved, her expression soft but unintrusive. "These aren't for me," he muttered, his voice rough from disuse. "Must be a mistake." Amelia nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face as the wind picked up, carrying more dust across the porch. "Happens sometimes out here. Letters get lost in the shuffle. But maybe they found the right hands anyway." She paused, glancing at the vast emptiness beyond the ranch. "Kids see things we adults try to hide." Jasper felt a pang in his chest, unfamiliar and sharp. He hadn't cried since his wife's funeral, hadn't allowed himself to dwell on the hollow ache. But these words, from strangers' children, pierced through. He folded the letters carefully, tucking them into his shirt pocket. The sun beat down, turning the air thick and heavy. "Water?" he asked abruptly, gesturing toward the cabin. It was the first time in years he'd invited anyone inside. Amelia hesitated for a moment, then smiled faintly, a real smile that cut through the dust like a ray of light. "I'd like that," she replied. They stepped into the shade of the porch, the door creaking open behind them. Jasper poured water from a tin pitcher into two mismatched cups, handing one to her. As they sat on the wooden benches, the wind outside howled softly. And for the first time, the silence in his home felt a little less oppressive. He didn't know it yet, but those misplaced letters had cracked open a door he thought was forever sealed. Amelia sipped her water, her presence a quiet anchor in the storm of his thoughts, and Jasper wondered if solitude was truly the only path left for a man like him. The storm came without warning, as storms often did in the Nevada desert. One afternoon, a few days after Amelia's first visit, Jasper was out in the corral, hammering a loose nail into the fence post. The sky had been clear, but suddenly the wind picked up, carrying whispers of dust that grew into a roaring gale. Red clouds of sand billowed from the horizon, turning the air thick and opaque. Jasper shielded his eyes, spotting a rider approaching through the haze. It was Amelia again, her horse struggling against the wind as she clutched a satchel of mail. "Mr. Holt," she called over the howl, dismounting quickly and leading her horse toward the barn. "I got a few letters for the ranches nearby. Thought I'd drop yours if there was any." Jasper nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. There wasn't any mail for him, but he didn't say so. Instead, he gestured toward the cabin. "Better get inside. This one's coming fast." They hurried in, the door slamming shut behind them just as the full force of the sandstorm hit. The windows rattled, and dust seeped through the cracks, coating everything in a fine layer of grit. Jasper lit the stove, boiling water for coffee, while Amelia brushed sand from her dress. The cabin felt smaller with her in it, her presence filling the space that had been empty for so long. He poured 2 cups of strong black coffee, handing one to her without a word. They sat at the rough-hewn table, the storm raging outside like an angry beast. Amelia sipped her coffee, glancing around the sparse room. A single bed in the corner, a shelf of dusty books, and a rifle hanging on the wall. "Does it always come on like this?" she asked, her voice cutting through the wind's moan. "Most times," Jasper replied, his tone gruff. "Samak doesn't give warnings. You learn to read the signs or get buried." She nodded, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "Back in Missouri we had blizzards, snow so deep it swallowed fences, but this feels like the land itself is trying to erase you." Jasper stared into his coffee, the steam rising like ghosts. He wasn't used to conversation, especially not with a woman who looked at him without pity or expectation. "Why'd you come out here?" he asked finally, surprising himself. "Missouri to Dust Hollow. Ain't much of a trade." Amelia set her cup down, her eyes distant. "My husband died 2 years ago. Mining accident. The ground gave way, and he was gone. Folks back home thought I'd remarry quick, said a woman like me shouldn't be alone. But I couldn't stay. Every street, every house reminded me of what was missing. So I took the postal job here. Figured a new place might let me breathe." Jasper felt a familiar ache stir in his chest. He traced the rim of his cup with a calloused finger. "Lost my wife to fever. 7 years back. She was the one who made this place feel like home. After, well, it's just walls now." The wind howled louder, shaking the cabin as if testing its foundations. Amelia leaned forward slightly. "Do you ever think about starting over? Or is the quiet all you need?" He met her gaze, her hazel eyes steady and kind. "Quiet's what I know. People come and go. Land stays. But people make the land worth staying for," she said softly. "I learned that the hard way. Those cold suppers alone, they're colder than any blizzard." Jasper didn't respond right away. Instead, he stood and added a log to the stove, the fire crackling to life. The warmth spread through the room, pushing back the chill seeping in. He offered her a piece of hardtack from the pantry, and they ate in companionable silence, the storm their only companion. As the hours passed, Amelia shared more. Stories of her childhood on a farm, the letters she delivered that brought joy or sorrow to recipients, and how she found solace in the rhythm of sorting mail. Jasper listened, his usual reticence giving way bit by bit. He told her about the cattle drives he'd done in his youth, the vast skies that made a man feel small, and the nights when the stars seemed close enough to touch. By evening, the wind began to die down, the dust settling like a blanket over the landscape. Amelia rose to leave, but paused at the door. "Thank you for the shelter, Mr. Holt. And the talk." "Jasper," he corrected, his voice low. "Call me Jasper." She smiled, a genuine warmth breaking through. "Amelia, good night, Jasper." He watched her ride off into the fading light, her silhouette swallowed by the settling dust. The cabin felt emptier than before, but not as cold. For the first time in years, Jasper didn't mind the silence. It held the echo of her words. He sat by the stove long into the night, the misplaced letters from the children still in his pocket, their pleas mingling with Amelia's stories in his mind. The storm had passed, but something inside him had shifted like sand reshaped by the wind. In the weeks that followed the sandstorm, Amelia's visits to Jasper's ranch became a quiet routine, like the predictable rise of the sun over the Nevada hills. She would ride up on her bay mare, sometimes with a bundle of letters tucked in her satchel as an excuse, other times with nothing but a nod and a smile. Jasper found himself glancing toward the horizon more often, anticipating the dust trail her horse kicked up. He didn't admit it to himself at first, but her presence chipped away at the isolation he had worn like armor. One morning, as the dew still clung to the sparse grass, Amelia arrived with a stack of mail for the neighboring spreads. She dismounted and joined Jasper by the corral, where he was shoeing a stubborn gelding. "Got a letter for old Mr. Harlan down the way," she said, handing him a spare envelope meant for someone else. "Thought I'd stop by. The ride out here's peaceful. Gives a body time to think." Jasper straightened, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. The air carried the scent of sagebrush and horse sweat. "Peaceful's one word for it. Empty's another." He took the envelope, though it wasn't his, and they walked toward the cabin. Over coffee on the porch, Amelia began sharing stories from her rounds. She spoke of the letters she delivered. One to an elderly miner waiting for word from his son in California, the envelope worn thin from anxious fingers. Another to a young woman in town, her first love letter from a cowboy out on the trail, words that made her blush and dream. "Letters carry more than ink," Amelia said, her voice soft against the distant lowing of cattle. "They bring hope or closure. Sometimes just a reminder that someone's thinking of you." Her eyes met his, and Jasper felt a pull, like the tide drawing back before a wave. He nodded, staring at the horizon where the red earth met the endless blue sky. "Never thought much about it. Folks out here don't write much. Too busy surviving." But her words lingered, stirring memories he usually pushed down. That afternoon, as they sat in the shade, Jasper opened up a fraction more. He told her about his wife's final days, the fever that came sudden and fierce, how he sat by her bedside through endless nights, helpless as she slipped away. "Watched her fade and couldn't do a damn thing," he said, his voice low and rough. After that, surviving felt like punishment. Amelia listened without interruption, her hands folded in her lap. When he finished, she reached out, not to touch him, but to steady the cup he gripped too tightly. "Sometimes living on is the only way to honor them," she said gently. "Not forgetting, but carrying them forward." There was no pity in her tone, only understanding, and it eased something in Jasper's chest, like loosening a knot tied too long. As the visits continued, Amelia shared more of her own scars. One evening, under a sky streaked with sunset oranges, she spoke of the pressure back in Missouri after her husband's death. "The whole town whispered, said I should find another man. Start fresh. But I wasn't ready. Grief isn't something you shake off like dust." She paused, tracing patterns in the dirt with a stick. "I came west for quiet, same as you. But quiet can turn to loneliness if you're not careful." Jasper recognized the echo of his own life in her words. They were both survivors, marked by loss, but not broken by it. Each conversation peeled back layers. He learned of her love for reading dime novels by lantern light, her skill at mending saddles from her father, and her quiet faith in small kindnesses. In return, he shared tales of his younger days, driving cattle through blizzards, the camaraderie of campfires that faded with time. The ranch felt different with her there. The silence between them was comfortable, not oppressive. One crisp morning, as Amelia helped him stack hay in the barn, the scent of dried grass filling the air, Jasper realized how much he looked forward to these moments. She laughed at a stubborn bale that tumbled down, her voice light and genuine, and he caught himself smiling. A rare thing. But he kept his distance, walls still standing, though cracked. As she rode away that day, the dust settling behind her, Jasper stood on the porch longer than usual. He touched the letters in his pocket, their words a reminder that perhaps, just perhaps, he wasn't as alone as he thought. Christmas Eve in 1883 brought a fierce sandstorm to Dust Hollow, the kind that howled like lost souls and buried the world in red grit. The cold of the desert winter seeped through cracks, turning the air inside Jasper's cabin sharp and biting. He had spent the day alone, as always, tending to the livestock in the barn, where the wind rattled the doors like impatient fists. No decorations adorned his home. Jiangxin was just another day in the endless cycle of survival. As dusk fell, the storm intensified, visibility dropping to nothing beyond the porch. A knock echoed through the gale, startling Jasper from his seat by the stove. He opened the door to find Amelia standing there, her coat dusted with sand, a scarf wrapped tightly around her face. "Jasper," she said, her voice muffled but urgent. "I have an urgent letter. Got mixed up in the post. Couldn't wait till morning with this weather." He ushered her inside, closing the door against the roaring wind. Sand scattered across the floor as she unwound her scarf, her cheeks flushed from the cold. Jasper stoked the fire, the flames leaping higher to warm the room. "Sit," he said, pointing to the table. "Coffee?" Amelia nodded, pulling off her gloves. But instead of a standard letter, she placed the two familiar children's notes on the table, the ones to Santa that had started everything. "These aren't urgent in the postal sense," she admitted, her eyes meeting his. "But they feel urgent to me. I know Santa doesn't ride into Dust Hollow, but maybe you should read them again, and perhaps one of us can answer." Jasper stared at the papers, their childish scrawl unchanged. He sat down heavily, unfolding them under the lantern's glow. The words hit harder this time. Pleas for a lonely father to find companionship, to smile again. In the flickering light, they weren't just ink on paper. They were mirrors reflecting his own hollow existence. His throat tightened, a rare swell of emotion rising. For years he had convinced himself that solitude was his fate, a penance for failing to save his wife. But these letters whispered otherwise. He had the right to live, to love, to try once more. Amelia watched him quietly, the storm pounding outside like a heartbeat. "Kids have a way of seeing the truth," she said softly. "They don't dress it up." Jasper's eyes blurred, a single tear escaping despite his efforts to hold it back. It wasn't just grief for the past. It was recognition of the present, the years wasted in isolation. He looked at Amelia, her presence a steady anchor in the chaos. "Stay for supper," he said, his voice rough but earnest. "There's no sense riding back in this." She agreed, and they prepared a simple meal together, cornbread baked on the stove, beans warmed from the pantry, and a splash of corn whiskey in tin mugs. As they ate by the fire, the conversation flowed deeper than before. Jasper spoke of his youthful dreams, building a ranch filled with laughter, a place where family gathered around the table, no one left to face the nights alone. "Thought I'd have that once," he admitted, staring into the flames. "But life had other plans." Amelia smiled faintly, her hand resting near his on the table. "Those dreams don't expire, Jasper. There's still time to make them real." She shared her own hidden hopes, a life beyond loss, where quiet evenings weren't echoes of emptiness but shared moments of peace. As the whiskey warmed them, the storm outside seemed to fade. When Amelia rose to leave, Jasper stood too, his hand gently catching her arm. "Thank you," he said, his eyes locking with hers, "for not letting me be alone tonight." She turned, her gaze bright in the firelight. "Thank you for letting me in." They stood there a moment, the air thick with unspoken possibility. Amelia stepped back, but not before her fingers brushed his. As she bundled up and braved the dying wind, Jasper watched from the door, the letters clutched in his hand. Alone again, he sat by the fire, resolve hardening in his chest. He wouldn't let loneliness claim another day. These words weren't just for some distant father. They were a call for him to answer his own silent pleas. After the Christmas storm passed, Dust Hollow returned to its harsh rhythm. Cold mornings where frost etched the ground like fragile lace, and days filled with the endless toil of ranch life. Jasper woke earlier than usual, his breath visible in the chill air as he tended the cattle, but his mind wandered to Amelia. The letters from the children lay on his table, a quiet reminder that change didn't come from the sky. It came from within. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of purpose beyond mere survival. A few days later, Jasper rode into town, his horse's hooves kicking up dust on the main street. He tied up outside the post office, a small wooden building with a faded sign creaking in the breeze. Amelia was inside, sorting envelopes under the glow of a hanging lamp. She looked up as he entered, surprise lighting her face. "Jasper? No mail today, I'm afraid." "Didn't come for mail," he said, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. "Came to ask if you'd ride out to the ranch sometime. No storm this time, just coffee and talk." Amelia's eyes softened, a smile tugging at her lips. "I'd like that. Tomorrow?" The next afternoon, she arrived as the sun hung low, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. They sat on the porch, mugs of coffee steaming between them, the vast desert stretching out like an unspoken promise. Jasper broke the silence first. "Do you believe in miracles out here in the West?" Amelia gazed at the horizon, where distant mountains cut sharp silhouettes. "Not the kind with angels and gifts from above. But I believe in people who dare to love again, even when life's beaten them down. That's miracle enough for me." Her words hung in the air, echoing his own thoughts. Jasper set his mug down, his hands rough from years of labor but steady now. "I've spent too long alone, thinking that's all there was. Those letters, they made me see I don't have to stay that way. I want you to be part of this life, Amelia. Not to fill a void, but to build something new. She turned to him, her hazel eyes bright with emotion. "I've been waiting for you to say that. Yes, Jasper, I'll stay. As long as we're in it together, no promises we can't keep." They walked inside as twilight deepened, the cabin's warmth a stark contrast to the cooling night. At the table, Jasper pulled out the children's letters. "We should answer these. Not as Santa, but as us." Amelia nodded, taking a pencil. Together they wrote, "Dear kids, your dad found someone who makes him smile. Sometimes the best gifts come from opening your heart." They sealed it in an envelope, knowing it might never reach the children, but it was their reply to fate itself. In the months that followed, Amelia continued her work at the post office, delivering hope in envelopes while building a life with Jasper. The ranch transformed subtly. Fresh curtains in the windows, a garden patch sprouting green against the red earth, and evenings filled with shared stories by the fire. Jasper learned to laugh again, the sound foreign at first but growing natural. Amelia found peace in the quiet vastness, her grief softening in the shared space. Dust Hollow remained unforgiving. Storms came, cattle strayed, and the sun scorched without mercy. But for Jasper and Amelia, it became a home, a testament to courage and connection. Amid the dust and isolation, they proved that even in the harshest West, two souls daring to open their doors could turn solitude into something enduring.